So today's video is going to be relatively exciting because I'm going to be showing you how I record and process vocals. I think the best way to do that is to show you through a tune that I've already done. If you have been keeping up with the live streams, then you would be familiar with this tune, and if not, then you could hear this for the first time. So we're going to start at the bridge, and just take a listen to the vocals that I've done that carries over into the second section of the tune.
They rich in my shadow where they dwell. I'll let them get to me. Phantoms in my sleep, get my soul. They reach in my shadow where they dwell. I won't let them get to me. Phantoms in my sleep. 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 Get my soul. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Your soul. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Keep my soul. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep. Phantoms in my sleep.
So what I love about doing this kind of stuff is, even though it takes a little bit of, I guess, perception before you get into recording this, it gives you a whole different avenue for either coming up with stuff for intros or using things as a percussive manner. And I'm going to be walking you through pretty much the entire process about how I use this stuff. I did want to give you an example of something that was pre-recorded, so that way you kind of have a mindset about like how this stuff is applied in general. But you can, I mean, with anything, with resampling, of course, you can always do the craziest of things. So the title of this tune is called Phantoms, and the lyrics of this goes, "Phantoms in my sleep, keep my soul out they reach, and my shadow is where they dwell, I won't let them get to me." And it's just something that we came up with on stream, and it kind of boded well towards this of the tune. But that's not really what's important. What is important is that I've recorded this on my own. You don't need the craziest microphone or like the most clear thing. You just need to make sure that your levels are pretty good whenever you record this with your microphone. So for example, you don't want to talk directly in the mic like this because it's going to have a lot of distortion and stuff if you want the sound to be relatively clean. But really all you need to do is go into one of these bad boys and go into your mono right here. And what I like to do is actually turn on the metronome, but just make it super quiet. And then I try to either write down some bars or I try to write down some phrases that's somewhat in time. So if we were to hit play and just listen to this, then you can hear that the metronome is on, but it's very quiet. So if I were to record something, it could be something very simple, kind of like, "Make a tut, don't give a cluck." You know, something like that. Could be super simple. Let's actually record this. And I make tuts and such, doing something for a video, don't give a cluck. So it's somewhat in time, and if we were to play this back, then I make tuts and such, doing something for a video, don't give a cluck. I know, it's super stupid, but the processing from this is really what matters, and that's just applying all different kinds of effects and whatnot in order to make this more interesting. But you can get acapellas, you can get all different kinds of things in order to make this usable. Now, one thing that I'll say is that one of the most powerful things that you can do with this is to manipulate the warp modes here. This is after the processing and stuff, but if you wanted to change this into beats mode or something, you could do it like that. I make do something for video, don't give a cluck. I make or you can do something that's relatively consistent, so you can do something like this. I make and such. Although I don't really particularly like doing things that way, at least not for me. I like having the whole phrase in there. So tuts and such, tuts and such. So let's get into the actual processing of this. What I like to do is I've got this multi-pass rack that I do on drum resampling that I use on everything, but let's just go ahead and make something from scratch because that will make a lot more sense, and that way you can actually follow along the video. The key components to this that I use are delays and frequency shifters, because that doesn't necessarily destroy the sound so much. It just kind of makes it, well, take a listen. Tuts and such. So even by messing with this, and setting some kind of randomizer on here. And let's just set this to every fourth bar. Normally, whenever I do this kind of thing, it would make sense to, I don't know, put it at an arbitrary number. But for this in particular, I know that every fourth beat is going to change into something different, so that way it's going to be at least a little bit more predictable as far as a usability sense. So now I'm just going to click on this and apply this to maybe like 2 point something K, and let's just take a listen to how this sounds.
Tuts and such.
So the thing to keep in mind with this is that you're going to want to duplicate this a few times, so that way it's got enough time to kind of run through the pattern. But now what we can do is we can take a delay or so and pretty much apply the same thing here, maybe in a different sense to the different times on this. Now obviously that sounds terrible, and that's just because this is paying more attention to the higher frequencies. So maybe something that we can do instead in order to mitigate that is just make this positive, so that way whenever this goes down it's only going to go lower.
Yo, don't give a cluck. I mean, yo, don't give a cluck. Give a cluck. Tuts and such.
Doing something for a
Yo,
video.
don't give a cluck.
Such. Doing something for a video.
So you can already see just by messing with a couple of effects, you might have to meander with it a bit, but it's already kind of making something that's relatively cool. So something else that we can do is we can grab ourselves another one here and set the mix on this to something like that, and then we can play with a bunch of other effects. It really depends on what you want to do. You can try the brand new dual delay. You could also do something like convolution reverb, which will give that a shot. So maybe I'll pull this around and just kind of whip this in this way and see what that does. You can also adjust the I guess multiplication aspect of this, or the ratio rather, sorry. But
Tuts and such. Make tuts and such.
Doing something
Before a video.
Give a clap.
Yo, don't. I make tuts and such. Before a video.
Yo, don't give a cluck.
Such. Before a video. Give a cluck.
Make tuts and such.
it's super cool, and I just have a lot of fun messing with this in general. And again, like I said before, you can always go back and do different things like this to where you adjust the pitch. You can also do things to where you apply reverb, and one cool trick right here is you can actually move this off and use something like an audio follower to where we set a normal amount on this. So let's just listen to that. Right, so it sounds like it's very spacious, but what we can do is actually apply this to the mix and move this down, so that way whenever there's sound coming in to where the waveform is not quiet, or like there's actual like dynamics to it, that it's going to cut the reverb off. And then we can set a release time on here that for this section in particular, I already know that it's going to happen right here because it's quiet, and then maybe a little bit here we can actually have reverb come into that.
Make tuts and such.
Doing something for
Video.
I make tuts and such. Tuts and such.
Video.
Give a cluck.
Doing something for a video. Don't give a cluck.
So there's tons of things that you can do with this, but it's really a matter about how creative you can get with using your effects in this way. So something else that might be worth considering is using convolution reverb on this if you wanted to. And whenever you're recording this, a few different options that you can have is using a short convolution reverb like this, and then maybe posting this at the very beginning, as I usually do. And so whenever you play this,
Such. For video. Don't give a cluck.
Tuts and such.
so when you do this, you're going to want to resample this live, because there's no way to actually control this, unfortunately, even though it's super cool, and I would love for Kilohertz to add in a feature like that to where you can kind of bounce the loop back and forth. I think that it takes so much processing power though with convolution reverbs that that's why it's not really possible, at least not yet. So let's just pretend like we've kind of done all that. The next thing that we want to focus on is actually how to make this how to get this ready to be actually like used in the tune, because if you look here, there's a bunch of dynamics in here. You want to treat this just like percussion, and the way that Zane Wolf taught me was to use just a crap ton of compression on this and squash the hell out of it. So literally like boom. Set the ratio to 10, set the attack to be short, set the release to be short, and we're just going to kind of adjust this until we find relatively something that's not too crazy in the peaks, but something that's also like pretty present, I guess. So
give a cluck for a video.
And to me, it sounds really good when everything is super compressed like that. Even though there's some EQ stuff to control and whatnot, it sounds so nice because everything is super duper consistent. And so when you add stuff like that and you get ready to bounce it, one last thing that you might want to consider is clipping it. So I just use Newfangled Saturate, and that way anything that comes through this is automatically going to be pretty much squarified. So if you take a look at the oscilloscope here, we can set this to play mode, or I'm not sure, trigger mode rather, and let's take a look at what's happening on our waveform.
Don't give a cluck. Search. Video. Don't give a cluck. Search. Video. Don't give a cluck.
So what I did here was I actually applied the output gain reduction. So the more that you drive it, the more that you push off of it. And this, as you can see on the curve, pretty much squarifies everything, because if we back off of this, you'll see that there's still some dynamics and peaks in here. See all that stuff. So what you kind of want to try to find, and this is just a rule of thumb and something that I try to do, but this is a really good way to like just make everything super consistent and a lot easier to use. Cool. So the next thing to do is we can just bounce it out and see what we get. I'm not really too concerned about it, but within this we've got several different aspects of this phrase that we can literally just click and drag over here and start to make little changes and stuff too. So I'm going to take a listen to how this sounds.
Search. Don't give a.
And what we want to do is really just find some of these parts or some of these phrases that sound cool, something like this. Right? That sounds really cool. So we can move this over and apply this into certain spaces within our groove. So I'm not going to actually apply anything to this track here, but as you can see, there's all of this stuff that I've added to this. So so I've turned this down by quite a lot just because of the way that the mix is, but for a matter of having presence and stuff. If you look at the previous chains that I've used on this, I've done pretty much the same thing, right? Having a little bit of reverb, bit crushing even, some filtering, some delay, and then again, just crushing it again towards the end. So, you know, if I wanted to play something right here or whatever, I could be like... and I can just find something here that could be useful to me. So let me see where that recording is. I'm going to go back into here where it's clean, and then I can maybe take like a little phrase right here or something and just kind of move this over like this, and then see how this kind of leads into the next piece. So, and then you can do something like repeating, or this is where you get into like your pitching and stuff, or you can also go into cutting this up like using your beats mode. So we can, and then maybe we can have something like this to where we pull this out and stretch it. And really from here, it's just using these to create phrases and to add interest to the groove that you've already established. Right? Now, the other cool thing that you can do is once you kind of have stuff that you're happy with, you can take little pieces of it like this and even do something to where you stretch this out like so, and then we can double click on this and then do like exponential rhythms. So we can move this over this way. You have to make sure that you're highlighting the audio event that you want to apply this to, and we can move this over. And then as you can see, we have kind of to move the waveform because there's nothing here, so we have to find that spot. So I'm going to hit undo quickly, and then I'm going to bounce this part out because it's going to mess it up. Now when I apply the clip, there we go, that's what we're looking for. So now I can move this over this way and have it go from fast to slow. So, and then you could play with the pitch and pretty much do automation on this, and like there is no right or wrong, but it is a matter of like, hey, here's some cool tricks that you can use in which to explore. Then maybe you can finish the phrase over here to kind of complete that. So now we've got this little section here that kind of adds to the rhythm and makes it seem like it's more of like a piece of percussion as opposed to something that's actually like being wrapped over cleanly. And that's why I say you don't have to have an amazing, incredible recording of this, because you're going to end up destroying it anyways. But what this comes down to once you have these phrases is that everything is in time, especially if you record this yourself. And from that, it makes it very easy to kind of just click and drag the phrases that you want to place into this, or do like cuts and repeats, because you don't have to worry about doing the time stretching. Now you can do something like that if you wanted to. So you could go and switch this into repitch mode. And if you either do 50% or double percent or 200%, then it's still going to be in time, because you're either pretty much turning it up an octave or down an octave. So for example, if I were to play this, right, that's in time. But likewise, if I were to do it like this as well, it still works. Now maybe not everything works, but that little phrase at the end was kind of cool. And then you can use it like that in that particular sense. With that being said, it is kind of just a quick workflow, and no matter what kind of processing you do to this, because I encourage you to experiment on your own, is treat it like percussion. And after you're done recording, doing the initial recording, make sure that you just squash the heck out of it, because that's going to help make everything usable, and it's going to be super consistent to where you're not going to have like insane dynamics, at least as far as this kind of music. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully that was helpful to you all. As always, you can always ask me questions and stuff if you feel like you need to, and be sure to save your racks, because if you create something that you like, especially something like this, we want to call this maybe save vocal perk 1. Now you're always going to have that, and as opposed to having to do this from scratch every time, you could just pull this back up and get into the same stuff that you're going to change. So thank you guys so much, and let's figure out what we're going to do in the next one.